Okay. Picture this scene. 1994 Orlando, Florida. It's muggy, because it's always muggy. Brian Clark's 25-year-old entrepreneur and partner in the Radiation Group, a web design firm. I'm a 25-year-old kid who happens to be the marketing director for NCM Theater and the Florida Film Festival, a not-for-profit art house theater. I pull up to this greasy spoon called Dan's Family Restaurant. It's one of those classic Southern diners where the waitress pops her gum and calls you honey when she takes your order. I was there to meet Brian Clark and talk about launching a website for the theater and the festival. But this was not going to be an ordinary meeting, at least not for me, because I walked in with this little germ of an idea and modest expectations, and I walked out inspired and electrified. One conversation with Brian, and I was completely taken with his vision of how the web would empower us all, how it would especially benefit independent artists, how we would form communities online and collaborate on a global scale. And Brian's energy, it was all punk rock, do-it-yourself, boundless opportunity. The revolution is now. We can build it. Boom, it hit me like a lightning bolt. That's not an ordinary meeting, that's a Brian Clark meeting. And he had those kinds of conversations with so many people all the time. I drove back to the office, buzzing with energy, head full of ideas, and heart determined to make that happen. The website was no longer a modest little proposal, a silly idea that might generate some PR. Brian showed me that it was actually the first step into an incredible future, and we would build it. And we did build that site, and it was just the first step, because Brian, along with his ever-evolving community of partners and collaborators and friends and geniuses and oddballs, of which I am definitely one, and co-conspirators, many of you are all out there right now, built and nurtured an incredibly diverse range of projects and businesses, like Revenues, a community publishing venture focused on performance marketing, or The Slant, a hyper-local community publishing platform that was truly 10 years too early. In fact, the things he was trying to do, people are only now figuring out. Nothing So Strange, a mock documentary and web experience that put him on the radar of the federal government, and probably not for the first time. And I'm pretty sure not the last time either. IndieWire, still the leading voice of the independent film community. The legions of people whose voices have been amplified by IndieWire is incredible. IndieWire was a key player in the evolution of independent filmmaking to an economic force. You absolutely cannot underestimate how important IndieWire was to filmmaking, to American independent filmmakers, to the entire community. And as his work and interests evolved, the Radiation Group with Tammy and Andrew and JD, Jim and the crew, would become Global Media Design, and then evolve again to GMD Studios. And Brian continued to be a central force in marketing and advertising projects, the likes of which had not been seen before. There was Beta 7 for ESPN NFL 2K4, Art of the Heist for Audi, Ford Bold Moves, all truly groundbreaking work in advertising, and yet he still found time to do independent projects like the alternate reality game Eldritch Errors, which he delighted in scaring the heck out of people. And there was so much more. Brian planted flags in uncharted territories all along the way. He was a mad tinkerer who made crazy things, and he had brilliant ideas and incredible insights, and he put them all out into the world. And it's an astonishing list of accomplishments. But as remarkable as those achievements are, and they are remarkable, they're not what made Brian Clark a great man. For as long as I've known Brian, he's been this incredible life force. Brian embraced people and their ideas, and he generously shared his ideas with everyone. And when you spoke to Brian, no matter what the topic, he was 100% there. He was in it. He was present. His passion and his intelligence were formidable and energizing. And he had a playfully wicked sense of humor. At events and conferences, Brian's table was where the troublemakers sat. And you wanted to be at that table. You absolutely wanted to be at that table. I couldn't possibly count the number of times at one of these events I'd be walking the hallway or mingling after a presentation, and Brian's distinctive throaty voice would come out of the din of noise. "Monello, come over here. I want you to meet someone." Wherever he went, everyone knew him and he knew everyone. And he wanted to introduce people he loved to other people he loved. And all of his introductions ended with some variation on, "You two have a lot to talk about. You should get up to something." Whether he was keynoting Power to the Pixel in London, or creating a body hand puppet at ArgFest in Atlanta, or instigating raucous discussions over flaming drinks in a tiki bar in Portland, or standing on a table in a big conference room and instigating a creative riot at Storyworld in San Francisco, Brian's enthusiasm was magnetic. People wanted to be around him. It was the Brian Clark traveling roadshow, and if you experienced it, you'd never, ever forget it. Now, I know there are a lot of people who love Brian as much as I do, but even I had no idea, really, the extent of his impact. Over the last couple of weeks, his Facebook page has exploded with hundreds of heartfelt expressions of love for Brian. People from every phase of his life, people who knew him for decades, people who hadn't spoken with him in decades, people who met him only a few times, people who never met him at all, wrote beautiful words for him. It's a remarkable outpouring of love and gratitude, and it's not just on Facebook. Friends on both the East and West Coast are planning events to celebrate Brian in the coming weeks. And right at this very moment, people who couldn't be here today are taking part in a tribute online. My phone has been buzzing nonstop this week. People asking me to tell you all how much Brian Clark changed their industry for the better, changed their lives for the better, to tell you all how much he meant to them. It's this amazing global community that he brought together that is Brian's true legacy. It's us, it's all of us together. They say that the true measure of a man is not what he does, but in the lives he has touched. And by that measure, Brian Clark is a great man. I love you, brother, and we're all going to miss you.